Yeah, so we'll get into that in a second, but let's just sort of take a bunch of steps backwards and let's sort of talk about Greg's decision making about how he sort of started this sheep flock, and then we'll move forward from there into day-to-day operations, and we'll just get as detailed as we feel is necessary. So do you want to kick off like some of the early decision making that Greg made with his sheep flock?
Yeah, so Greg started with cattle, and that was his main enterprise, and he was, trying to get the cattle off on their feet, get them rolling, and while working a town job. And so, that brought in complications as its own. He had to move him in the morning before he went to work in the dark, and he moved him in the evening when he got back from work in the dark. And so he didn't really have a lot of time, free time with, working in town and doing the cattle. And so he started looking at getting into sheep, adding as a complementary enterprise to his farm. And he knew that in order to make it work for him, he had to limit the sheep moves to once a week on the weekends when he actually had a day off, and so he could actually, get some stuff done. So he made it, a priority that the sheep were, kind of second priority in that they needed to be able to make it on week moves, no wormer, no
hoof trimming,
no shearing, because they're hair sheep.
Yeah,
that's another thing that he wanted.
No tail docking. No.
And then he wanted them trained to single strand polywire as opposed to netting, because some of you may know netting is very fun to deal with, in the fact that it's not fun.
Oh man, it works for what it is. It's just when you're having to take it up.
And I think it's a huge tool on a smaller scale.
Yeah, but when you're running 160 ewes,
you'd have to put you'd have to fence off a ton of area with the netting, and it's just too cumbersome. Not that you can't do it, but if you could train your sheep to single wire, it's going to save you so much work.
And we'll get into that too.
Yes, and so that's what he wanted. He wanted a sheep that fit that criteria. So he started looking around at sheep, to purchase, and the big thing was the parasite resistance, because he was under the strict belief he's not going to worm these sheep, because as many of you know, when you put wormer on your animals, it kills all the microbes and everything in there, or all the bugs inside them. So then their manure has those dewormer compounds, in the manure, which then kills any kind of, or keeps any soil life or bug life from decomposing that manure. And so you're left with pretty much sterile manure.
Yeah.
Which you're taking an asset and turning it into a liability, because what once was helping you grow soil and increasing, your soil life and your fertility is now just becoming a sterile
waste
toxic waste. And so he didn't want to get into the wormer, so that was like the big one. And as far as hair sheep go, St. Croix is one of the top parasite resistant breeds, and so that was kind of like the starting block for him. And he started with Katahdin, Florida Native, and some Barbados Black Belly as the three breeds of ewes that he started with. I think he had some St. Croix ewes too, and then bred strictly to St. Croix rams.
That's when we say St. Croix sired.
Yeah,
it's from back then. They're technically not true St. Croix sired at this point,
and they're like a cross of those four breeds.
Because once he got that initial sheep flock started, however many years ago that was, I don't even remember. He hasn't really bought in any other sheep. Like, he's sort of kept that genetic base rolling, and so the rams are from that initial mix. So they're a mix of all of those different hair sheep, parasite resistant hair sheep breeds, and it seems to be working pretty darn well at this point.
Yeah, that's what. Starting out, you've got to make the operation fit to your schedule, because you still have to function as a human, and if you're trying to adjust what you need to do to fit what the sheep need,
it's going to be less
you got to do it the other way around.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to flip it the other way around. And I'm not saying abuse your sheep.
No.
But if you have to make them work a little bit, it's not a bad thing to make them use their work clothes a little bit, and push them a little bit to help your business. And to a point.
Yeah, exactly. And sheep is one of those things where, in the beginning, even if you do buy, the correct breeds for your style of management, there's still going to be a high attrition rate, most likely, bringing those sheep onto your farm, especially if they come from a ways off. And I think he got a huge portion of his flock from Oklahoma, which is a good, as Greg would say, good jag, a good ways from here. And so he's
for 5 hours, maybe 6 hours.
But the environment's just totally different, and so it's similar but different. And so he in the beginning he lost a lot of sheep, and that's just part of it. Those are the animals that are not gonna, either they get really wormy, or either that, or they're not respecting the hot wire training that he's doing, or something like that. And in those aspects, they're culling themselves out of the flock. And so you just have to be prepared to eat a lot of sort of loss, so to speak, like literally eat, but also figure economically eat a lot of animals, so to speak, in the beginning, in order to get that core that is going to do well on your farm. And then sheep populate so quickly, you can expand pretty fast from that sort of little central hub of good genetics, good epigenetics, if you will, and be able to grow something that really fits your management style out of that. That's sort of the advantage of the sheep thing, is that the time frame is so short for next generations compared to cattle, that you can go through that like adjustment period a lot faster. So what might take 5 to 10 years with a cattle herd will take a couple years with sheep maximum. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of advantages, but we sort of went into more of those in that previous video. If people are or previous episode, I should say, if people are interested in that. So that's like the breed aspect. But then the second piece to that is how he was going to manage them, and we already sort of hinted at that, about he didn't want to use netting. And he was going to be moving them once a week, at least at the beginning, although he knew that probably moving forward, because his ultimate goal is to quit his town job from the get. So he's like, once I quit my town job, I'm going to be able to manage these sheep more effectively and be able to move them more often and whatnot. And so, but up until that point, moving them once a week, no wormer, no tail docking, no hoof trimming, no nothing, basically just mineral. And by mineral, in the beginning, he just gave them salt. He didn't give them mineral until like 2 years ago. Other than that, they were just rocking on salt and water and fescue. No hay in the wintertime either. They were just grazing stockpile. And so given that, he also wanted to manage it with a single hot wire. He's like, that's the only way that I'm going to be able to do this, because he could not imagine using netting. And I agree. With a lot of the brushy areas that we run the sheep through, it'd just be impossible. You wouldn't be able to string out netting. So the process of breaking sheep to hot wire, single hot wire, is one that is like a necessity, in my opinion, if you're gonna be doing a large scale sheep operation. I know that there's all sorts of situations where you could string multiple wires at the same time, and there's like all sorts of tech, like Kiwi tech or something like that. There's ways that you could build sort of more reinforced fence for sheep easier than netting, but at the end of the day, it is so nice to just be able to unroll a little strand of hot wire and let the sheep do their thing. Yeah. So the process that Greg went through to break his sheep to single hot wire. So in the beginning, if you want to start with netting, that's totally fine. Like, you've got your core group of sheep, and you're going to be reducing the amount of electric barrier that you're using, if you want to call it that. You can start with netting, or start with like 4 strands or 3 strands of hot wire. Just run 3 or 4 reels.
Polybraid,
one after the other, and then when you move them, the same deal. After about 2 weeks, you then reduce 1 wire. And you keep doing that every 2 weeks. You take a wire out, take a wire out, take a wire out.
Every month or something.
Yeah, every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was. I'd say about 3 weeks is probably a good time frame. So every 3 weeks, take out a wire until you get down to that single wire about 12 inches off the ground.
If you have O'Brien clips, it's the 4th. We use the 4th clip from the bottom.
Yeah.
Which is like 10 to 12 inches.
10 to 12 inches from the ground. And the sheep don't really like to hop over it. They're going to try to go underneath it. So that's the reason it's so low. You would think, just jump right over it.
They could jump right over it, but they don't want to.
But they don't want to. And the other thing to also mention is the post spacing is really tight. And so in comparison to cattle. So with cattle, like for me, it's like 9 steps between posts,
It's like 12.
which I don't know what that would be in feet. Like say
4 feet per
4 feet per step times 9 is like 30.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
30 feet probably between posts. With sheep fence, it's like 6 steps for me. So like 3 steps less. I don't know. 12 feet between posts, something like that.
Yeah, 10, 15 maybe.
Yeah, 12, 15 feet. But in the beginning, the tighter the better. So if you're training them, I would use like 9-foot spacings or something like that, nice and tight. And you want your wires also to be tight. You don't want them to be saggy, especially in the beginning. You want it to look as rigid and intimidating as possible. But then the second most important piece to this too is, first you need the fence to be hot, very
Super
hot,
hot.
like as hot as you possibly can get. It needs to be about like 7,000 kV minimum.
Yeah.
And because they need to have that immediate feedback if they touch that thing, because a sheep is not as big as because a sheep is not as big as
weren't expecting that, were you?
a sheep is not as big as a cow, and so the ground is not as good. So meaning the shock that they're going to receive with the electricity is not going to be as severe as 1,000 pounds rooted
They
in the
won't
ground.
feel it like a cow will.
Yeah, so you really need to make sure that dude's hot, especially if they have a lot of hair on them.
Yeah.
You really need to make sure that thing is 7,000 volts or more. And then the other piece is that there will be sheep that jump your fence. Like, it will happen if they're not broke to it. And that's what Greg did. If one jumps the fence and keeps jumping the fence, sooner or later the entire sheep flock is going to start jumping the fence. They basically teach each
He's
other
going to train them how to
jump.
train the other sheep how to do it.
And then you have an entire sheep flock of escape artists, and there's no way you're going to be able to keep them in. And you just are continuous grazing sheep, and then what's the point? So
Greg would take his 22 out there,
and go and take out sheep.
Shoot a sheep and butcher it and eat it.
And sheep, we've done it. They're very easy to butcher as far as
shoot. Because when you shoot, they're not like a cow. A cow will freak out. Sheep, they're just dumb. They just kind of walk. I mean, they definitely know something's up, but they're not like, wah, and just run.
The only thing that will go, wah, and start running around is the dogs.
Yeah. But the sheep are, I mean, they don't understand death, I guess is what it is.
A cow understands death and can smell it too, and that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, with the sheep, when you get jumpers, you need to just kill them or catch them, but you can't really catch them. So you just have to shoot them. That's and again, that's part of the loss in the beginning is once all those jumpers have been sort of, you got that habit out of the herd or flock. I'm going to keep saying herd instead of flock, but out of the group of sheep, if you get those jumpers out, then you've got a group that's going to be compliant and act like sheep, and then you're going to be a lot better off being able to train them to that single hot wire. And then once they're trained to that single hot wire, they get it. They don't really want to go out. And if they do, they want to come right back in. And so sometimes we'll have a sheep out, but for the most part,
like like you said, when they get out, they want to get back in. They're not out. They're not out because they want to be out. They're out because they somehow got pushed out or whatever.
They got freaked out by something and ran through a fence or something like that. Or maybe you had a post that was too high or a spacing that was too far between posts or something.
The thing is, I think sheep are more wary of the fence than the cows.
Yep.
The sheep, because like when we were running those dog fences, we ran the wire intentionally at the top clip of the O'Brien so that the sheep could walk underneath, and there was like two, they were split 50-50. They were looking at their buddies on the other side. They could have easily
they could have jumped and still not hit themselves.
I don't really want to go underneath there. I kind of want to go, but I don't. And so it's like, I think like with a cow will test it. Like a cow will go up there and kind of maybe like flick her tail on it, maybe
lick the post a little bit,
brush it with her hair, see if she sees a little bit. And then eventually, lick the post or the wire or whatever, and like they'll test your wire. That's why you never want to leave your fence charger off for a longer period of time. Or like a pig, once a pig gets shocked, it knows where the electric wire is. It's not going to cross it. A cow is a lot different, and I think a sheep is more
like a pig.
In between. Yeah, it's like it's not going to test it like a cow will.
Yep.
I mean, not that they won't get shocked, but I don't see sheep shocked very much at all, or like even near the fence. Like they respect it a lot.
It's very true. And once that happens, like the lambs figure it out very quick too, because they just want to be with the flock and they get shocked. Like those are the ones that you'll actually see get shocked are the lambs. So
they need a little bounce.
Yeah, but it's such a critical piece of the operation is getting your sheep broken to one single hot wire, and that's how to do it. You got to be stringent with your jumpers and get rid of them by eating them, and then your wire situation, start with 4, every 3 weeks take a wire out, and the ones that start escaping, get rid of them, and after a couple months you'll be down to one wire. And keep your post spacing tight and your fence tight in the beginning, especially. I mean, it's important all the time, but we can get away with we can get away with less posts now because the sheep are just, like you were saying, they don't test it, so they're so trained to it. Like, we don't go cattle spacing, but we'll go farther than 9 feet. We'll be more in the,
especially if it's flat.
more in the 10 to 12 foot range probably. But yeah, so that's sort of establishment, right? That's sort of how to get up and running with a low maintenance sheep flock.
You want to talk about our through the seasons, what we do as far as the sheep, lambing and bringing the rams up.
And I'll say that now the sheep are moved every other day. So he started with a weekly moves, and now it's every other day, and that's because we still are trying to prioritize the cattle, and
we could move them every
day. It's just more stuff to do, and so we move them every other day. In the wintertime, sometimes less, depending on how we're rationing out their stockpile.
The thing with the sheep too is we usually give them plenty for 2 days.
Yes.
Like the cattle, we're kind of more rationing it to half day moves, and in that what they have for a half day is depending on the year, obviously, but that's
time of year. Yeah.
If we leave them for more than a half a day, they're going to be way pushing it.
Yep.
So it's
unless
more of a fine
we screwed
line.
up. Yeah.
Right. It's more of a fine line though. Whereas with the sheep, it's we'll give them a big paddock that's plenty for 2 days, and then they'll go out there. They'll make it work. And sometimes we have to leave them an extra day, and it's not a big deal. So.
And right now during lambing season, they're staying in each paddock for about 5 days.
Yeah.
So you can, because the sheep are so resilient with the way that Greg started it, there's a lot of wiggle room. It's just your sheep will do better the more you move them, but yeah, anyway, so I just wanted to sort of cover that because we didn't really progress to that point. And we'll touch on this a little bit, but there's 2 permanent dogs that will be in that sheep flock at all times. That's the absolute minimum, and we usually have way more than that because we're selling dogs, but we'll get to that in a second. So you want to just go over on a year sort of basis what our sheep annual cycle sort of looks like.
Yeah, so let's just start with lambing because that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Lambing here in Missouri, it's obviously dependent on where you live as far as latitude.
Yep.
In the south, it's gonna warm up and green up a lot quicker than it is in the north, and so here in Missouri, we shoot for May. Greg shoots for May 1st lambing on pasture, and so what that kind of ensures is, the temperature's warmer. We've got plenty of green grass. So lambs cannot take cold and wet, and so anytime that it's cold and wet, we don't want to be lambing during. And so May 1st is a good date for here in Missouri. Obviously, you can tailor it to your situation. So May 1st we lamb. The lambs will all be born in about 3 weeks. From the start of lambing till the last lamb is born, and so they have a tight window that they're born in. They're growing up. What was it, around July?
Yeah, basically
June. It's 2 or 3 months after lambing. I think it's around July 1st.
Yeah.
We'll get the whole flock up, and by that time, I think, no, rams they're not mature enough to breed.
Yep.
But the ewes may start cycling. So with a cow can cycle one cycle, or can be bred one cycle after she calves, whereas a sheep, it takes a little bit longer. They need a little bit more time to recover before they start, cycling again. And so I think it's 4 to 6 months or something. I don't know what the exact
I don't remember what the exact month is.
But it takes a little while. So in order to we keep the rams in with the ewes through lambing, and then July 1st, so 2 months in.
May, June. It's
June.
basically most of May, June, July. So
not all of July though.
But so 2
months, 2-ish months. We'll get the sheep up, sort off withers and rams ewes, and then we take all the ram lambs and we'll go through which ones are going to make good rams and which ones we're going to castrate or band and make withers. And so then we make all the withers, and then we turn those back out in with the sheep, with the ewes, and then the rams get sorted off of the from the sheep. They go in what we call the bachelor pad. And it's basically 2 big paddocks that we just rotate back and forth during the summer.
It's sort of a woodsy, brushy area that's close to the house. And we have a bunch of retired / never started, never showed up to work guard dogs that they're house dogs that live at the house, but they are
house guard
dogs. So they spend all night going and barking at coyotes and foxes and neighborhood dogs and cats and whatever. And so they're close enough to the house that they sort of get a little bit of that protection, which means we don't have to have a dog with them. And what's interesting about that is like they're pushed.
Yeah,
those rams are pushed harder than any other sheep in the entire flock, because
as far as parasite load,
because
quality.
Moving them back and forth from July to December 1st is what? How many months is that? July, August, September, October, November. So it's like 5 months basically of the same paddock back and forth, and the forage quality goes way down and the parasite load goes way up. And I mean, we'll supplement them with hay a little bit if we really think that they're taking it down. And these are big areas, so it's not like
we're not like starving.
they're I don't know how many acres it is. Like
it's probably 10 acres each. 5.
Yeah, maybe
10
like
acres total.
10 acres total, and it's only 5 rams or something like that. So there's plenty of area for them, but that they get pushed by December 1st, and by then we had one out of the group that just didn't make it, as in he got wormy. And so it's almost like a stress test where if those rams can handle that kind of management, they're going to do fine on anybody's operation. If they're rotating them a little bit, even just a little bit, they're going to excel. And that ram is going to, like a bull, is going to have the most influence on the genetics of their flock.
And he's going to have that huge parasite resistance in his genetics.
Yep. And so it's a stress test for us, because we're selling seed stock to understand which rams are really going to make it. Because a ram lamb can look awesome and then go through this bachelor pad situation and just fall apart. And that's a good thing for us to know, because then we know, okay, we can't sell them as seed stock, and so we'll band them and turn them into a wither. And a wither and a steer are equivalent for those who are not familiar with sheep terminology. Castrated male. And so but then put the rams back in December.
Yes, so the sheep stay out, or the rams stay out all the way until December 1st when they go back in with the ewes, and that December 1st gives us May 1st lambing, as far as like the ewe's gestation and everything. I think it's 5 months, 6.
December, January, February, March, April. 5 months.
Yeah.
5 month gestation.
5 months. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, because then 2 months off and then 5 months separate. Yeah, it lines up.
And you can leave those rams in there, because the way sheep work is once one ewe starts to cycle, because the ram is there, all of the ewes will come into heat within that 2 to 3 week period, and all of the breeding gets done by the rams in that 2 to 3 week period, and then they're pregnant, and so they can't get doubly pregnant, and so then they're just hanging out, and the whole flock can stay together all the way through until July again. And the thing also we should talk about separating out rams is you have to be very careful that those rams either are in a situation where they physically cannot get out of it, like cattle panels, or there's no way they can smell those ewes, or hear. They can smell a ewe from so far away. So
sheep hate water, but a ram will swim a river to get to ewes.
Yeah.
So that's how they'll
go through a brick wall to figure it out.
If there's a way, they're gonna find it. Yeah. For them to get to the ewes, if they can see or smell or hear a ewe in heat.
So our recommendation on smaller acreages for separation is just get cattle panels, weld them onto a steel frame with caster wheels on the bottom, and just keep them in that pen and move it around your yard to mow your lawn
You
or
can
whatever.
even move it in with the sheep. Just keep him there with the ewes as long as he's in those cattle panels. He's not going to be able to get out, and you can just keep him on a rotation with the sheep. He's going to be happier with the ewes, even though he can't breed.
Yep.
But moving him around the yard, or anywhere.
And obviously, if you have big enough acreage, just move them far away.
Other side of the farm.
Other side of the farm where he can't see, hear, or smell them. So yeah, that's the important part there. And then I mean, all said and done, we only get the sheep up.
So let's talk about August.
Yeah, we only get sheep up twice a year. Once for that castration and sorting, and the other piece that happens during that first sorting in July is we'll take out all the culls. So anything that has runny tails, because at that point they've gone through the spring flush, they're in the middle of the summer at that point, they're on great forage. So anything that's got a runny tail or is looking skinny or just doesn't look right, we'll just take them out. Last year we had like 55.
That was withers.
Rams,
old rams that we castrated. Old ewes,
wormy young ewes, whatever. Mm-hmm. There was 55 sheep in total.
Scrubby looking ewe lambs.
It was a scrubby bunch, and they got all taken to the sale barn and sold.
Yeah.
And
it's like cleaning up the sheep flock a little.
Yep, and we do that once a year. And
being the predator
and the castration, and then because we sell seed stock, we don't sell lamb, grass-fed lamb. We use that for our own consumption. We get them up in August for a sheep sale, and we organize our sheep sale to happen on one weekend. So we can
over
3 days, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday usually. We'll get all the sheep up, bring them in, sort off the ones we're going to sell, sort off the ones we're going to keep, kick the ones we're going to keep back out into the pasture, and then those sheep will stay in that corral for that weekend as people come in and buy ewes, which are hard to come by because there's not that many of them.
Ewe lambs, ram
lambs, and yeah, we get to do that. That's always a fun weekend. We get to meet a lot of people.
It's not fun getting them up there and sorting them, but it's fun.
Yep.
Selling them to people.
Yep.
We also sell guard dogs at that point too.
Yep, absolutely. Usually accompanying a cadre of sheep to somebody, and yeah, they get sold all over the country.
Some of you guys on there. Bought sheep from us
in the past, and so and that's about it as far as management's concerned. We give them mineral, we give them water, we give them grass. We get them up twice a year.
In the wintertime, if you have green stockpile, and you might have already touched on this.
I hadn't mentioned it actually.
If you have green stockpile, as in like fescue. Where it's got a little bit of green in the base, and you've got your sheep on that green fescue, they don't need any hay, and they don't need any water. In fact, they won't take any water or hay.
Greg tried it with water in the beginning, and they wouldn't touch it.
He put a tank out there, marked where the water was, and it was at the same spot the next day, and it was frozen over.
Hadn't taken a single sip out of the water. So he's just like, all right, they're not going to eat it, or not going to drink any water.
There was an old shepherd that told him about that back when he was just starting.
And he didn't believe it.
Yeah, that's why he had to try it, which is good. I mean, it's good to try it.
And as far as people being concerned about the guard dogs in the wintertime, they find a way to drink water.
Most of the paddocks the sheep are rotating around have pond nearby, so they chew a
hole in the ice, or they eat snow or something like that. Those dogs are a hardy bunch.
They're built for the winter.
Like it was negative 25, and we had puppies out there, and they were just rolling around in the snow. They were going in. There was like in the hole in the ice that we had cut for, because it got so cold that we were afraid the dogs weren't going to be able to chew through that ice. So we cut a hole in a couple of the ponds for them to be able to drink. And they were playing in the water.
They got wet.
Negative 25.
I don't know if they did it when it was that cold, but like
midwinter, below single digits, below zero, they were getting wet, and they were just loving it. You'd have no idea.
You'd get there to the paddock, and they're just their hair's all wet and sopped. Or not sopping, but
frozen,
kind of wet and frozen. Hey guys.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, you guys are tough.
And so let's just touch on this briefly, because this is going to be a whole other topic as far as livestock guardian dog enterprises, but that's the way that we protect the sheep, is livestock guardian dogs. People have asked about guard llamas and guard donkeys and guard emus, believe it or not. and I've talked about this in the past, but
Greg should get an emu.
I know emus are so cool, but
They're kind of mean, aren't they?
they can be.
Yeah.
But it's a big
I guess that
bird.
they're supposed to be
It's
mean.
like a dinosaur. Yeah.
Emu. Kind of want them to be mean.
And people are like the reason why those options are so attractive is because all those things. I don't know about the emu, but all of those things, llamas and donkeys, alpacas maybe, I don't know. Well, they're grazers, so you don't have to supplement them with anything other than the food you're already giving the sheep in the form of grass. And so that's versus a dog. Dog food's expensive compared to grass and the hay and anything else, and so it's expensive to maintain a guard dog. But when you factor in, this is the reason why Greg doesn't run guard llamas or guard donkeys, is because if a pack of either coyotes or more likely just neighborhood dogs, stray dogs, house dogs, whatever, they'll gang up sometimes and come roaring out to a sheep flock just to wreak some havoc, and they'll kill a bunch of sheep by chasing them around, biting them up, that kind of stuff. And if you've got a guard llama or a guard donkey in there, maybe they are aggressive and maybe they will try to fight off a couple of them, but when there's a whole pack of predators, because that's what they are, in with your sheep, the chances are that guard llama or guard donkey, it's a prey animal deep down. As much as it's been bred to, guard its little fluffy counterparts or whatever, it's going to turn around and run.
Yeah.
And if it runs away, your sheep are just completely helpless. A guard dog, if you've got a couple of them especially, they're just going to stay and fight because they have nowhere to run to. So, and plus, really like the point of the guard dog
is the noise.
And like a donkey or a llama does not make the kind of noise that a guard dog does.
They can be loud, but not like a guard dog.
Loud. Like the guard dog can smell you coming. Like if the wind's pointing in the right direction, they can smell and hear us over a mile away. Easy.
You can't sneak up
on them. And they'll just bark their absolute ass off. So loud and intimidating, you'd think they're going to tear your throat out if you go in there. And that's the point, is everything else, people included, are like, man, I don't really want to go in there and mess with those sheep. I don't know about that crazy ass dog that's up there. And so that's really the reason. And if push comes to shove, they will fight and kill stuff if they have to. Like there was a post,
especially lady, she would mess a coyote up.
Yeah, there was a post about somebody who bought a guard dog from Greg.
One of ladies.
One of Lady and Big Boy. If people are familiar with our guard dogs, it was one of their counterparts. I'm pretty sure, and he killed a coyote the other week or whatever. So they'll do it if it really comes down to it. But really, they're there for the noise, and that's something that those other animals can't offer you. Is that early warning system as far as perception and also as far as noise is concerned. And it's a predator at the end of the day. When push comes to shove, it's not going to turn around and run. It's going to try to fight. Mm-hmm. So that's really, it's just peace of mind. Once you've got the
got teeth.
Yeah, once you've got the guard dog situation figured out, I mean, Greg has not had, knock on wood, very lightly, so I don't shake the camera. Greg hasn't had any predator problems whatsoever with the sheep since the guard dogs. So I don't blame him. There's a lot of guard dogs in there.
There's even a story, so he was running sheep. It had to be 5-10 years ago or whatever, but he had 2 guard dogs in with the sheep, and there was
Rue was the name of the guard dog. Yeah. I think it was Rue. I'm pretty sure.
His neighbor had goats, and I think she had an Anatolian Shepherd in with her goats.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about a different story, but yeah, I have another one. But anyway,
something jumped into the pen with the goats and the dog, grabbed the dog, killed it, dragged it out,
jumped back out, fence.
Carrying the dog.
Yeah.
And it was like messing with like neighbors. Something was messing with neighbors' dogs. Never messed with Greg's sheep. Didn't find a single ewe dead. Didn't find any sign that they had been messing with the sheep. He even he had the cows in that direction, and there was one of the steers. Its tail was bitten off. Something bit off its tail. And they think it was the neighbor's
like bull
mastiff,
yeah, or something.
But or maybe a cougar or something,
mountain lion.
But
yeah,
something big to tear up an Anatolian Shepherd. But it was a single dog.
Yep, not a pack.
And it wasn't a pack. And he had like 2 or 3 guard dogs in there with the sheep. And if like a predator hears 3 dogs barking, I mean, who knows how many others are with them, and they're not, like I said, they're not likely to to test it out.
And the thing though to recognize is that the guard dog is not really suited for every sheep situation. So the reason why we can't run the sheep on the majority of the acreage on the farm is because of the people that are around the farm, just residents that are living, and they have house dogs, and as well as they like to sleep at night, like most people. And so if the dogs are around, they do their job all night long and bark.
Did you hear Smokey the other night?
Yeah, I mean, Smokey's not even former guard dog. Never showed up to work.
He was a group of the puppies that they bought to raise, and he was too cute to make a guard dog. And
so now he's a house dog.
Like Greg gave them to Jan for Valentine's Day or something.
Something like that. Anyway, but they are loud, and and that's what they're bred to do, is they bark all night long. And so you'll have some very upset neighbors if you've got a pack of guard dogs that are guarding your sheep all night long. The other thing is other neighborhood dogs. There's just a high likelihood that if they come in and mess with the sheep, that they're going to end up dead. And so the last thing that you need to explain that you're going to want to explain is to a neighbor about the fact that your guard dog absolutely mutilated their, little house dog that was just going in to play around with the sheep. I don't even think you'd see the Chihuahua. No. I think he'd get eaten.
Or like a yeah.
But even a bigger dog,
like a collie was trying.
That was a story that I was going to say, is that Greg, when he first started with the sheep, there were some new people that moved in somewhere around here, and they'd come out into the country to from, I think they lived in Colombia or something like that, and they brought their border collie. And when they came out here, they didn't fence their border collie into their yard. They just let him roam around the neighborhood, and he ended up in the sheep flock. And Greg had seen him once in there, and he had gone to the neighbor and been like, "Listen, I've got a bunch of guard dogs out there, and I just don't want anything to happen to your dog if they get in with if he gets in with the sheep, because they're trained to protect the sheep." And the people didn't really take very kindly to it, and were like, "Oh, I came out here to let my dog roam around or whatever," and so they didn't either leash the dog up or put it in a fenced area or whatever. And then Greg went out there one day, and the collie was just going to herd the sheep, because that's what they're bred to do. And so was walking, sneaking up to the sheep to go and try to work them around or whatever. And I'm pretty sure it was a Roo, their big Great Pyrenees, just hit that thing like a truck and pinned it on the ground, and was about to grab it and start shaking it back and forth by the throat.
I think
Greg
started to.
Greg ran over and jammed a stick in the guard dog's mouth, Rue's mouth, and pried it open so he could get the little collie out of her mouth, and then brought the dog to the neighbors and was like, "Chain your dog up!" Like, it was like moments away from being dead. And so those are just the situations that you got to recognize, is that they're dogs, but they're not your like everyday house dogs. They're totally nice to people, and they would never be aggressive towards a human. We go and pet them all the time, but towards other people's house dogs, and the fact that they bark all night, if you're in a neighborhood situation, you're probably going to have to figure out another way of keeping your sheep protected, because it's not going to be a viable solution using dogs.
Last year we got to see Mammoth beat Big Boy. So we got Big Boy back. There was a gentleman in Ohio who was raising sheep, and he bought Big Boy to guard his sheep, and Big Boy was doing good, but then he just wouldn't eat. Big Boy wouldn't, because the guy had the same feeder, had the same food, I think.
Yep.
Had bought a bag with him, and just something about that stress of being in a new environment, he couldn't get Big Boy to eat. He would bring him hamburger, and that was the only way he could get Big Boy to eat, was hamburger out of his hand. And anyways, long story short, he brought Big Boy back to us, and so because he wasn't working out, and it was better for the dog to be here, we kicked him in with the sheep, and we had Mammoth and the little old female at the time were our two, big guard dogs, and Big Boy Mammoth came up to Big Boy, and like Big Boy was standing there, and Mammoth was trying to assert his dominance, and then Big Boy like snarled his teeth, and they both went up like a batch of lions, like snarling, and Mammoth threw Big Boy down to the ground, just started biting him. He just bit him right in the belly, and Big Boy was just doing all he could to try to defend it. Couldn't do anything. And just the power, if that was not a big dog,
because they were both like 125 pounds.
It would be dead. If Mammoth wanted to kill Big Boy, he could have killed him. He was just trying to assert his dominance or whatever.
They're super awesome at their job and really cool, but you just got to know the situation. So guard dogs you just got to make sure that they're always fed, because when they get hungry is when problems can start to happen. They'll start to roam. They might start nibbling on sheep, something like that. So always keep them fed. We have a gravity flow feeder out there that's in a cattle panel cage, essentially, where the dog can slip underneath this little gap in the cattle panels and go in and eat out of the gravity flow feeder. But the sheep can't, because the sheep will eat dog kibble. It won't eat meat. If you can throw meat scraps out there if you want to feed your dog some meat scraps, but I would say from a nutrition standpoint, you really should have kibble for your dogs, because do what you want, obviously, it's your dogs or whatever, but it's very hard to keep that meat from going rancid in the summertime, and they're just probably not getting all of the vitamins and minerals and that they need, because that's what dog feed is engineered for.
And I also wonder if, and this is just a hunch, but
Yeah.
like feeding the meat draws more of that predatory instinct, so that like
Maybe.
if lambing happens and they smell blood, like a trigger goes off.
It's like, it's my breakfast.
If they've never, obviously they could kill things like in everyday life and eat them. So maybe it's like, maybe I'm just blowing hot air, but like just if you're just feeding them kibble, there's less of a chance of them, being aggressive towards the sheep. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just,
but
take it for what it is.
If you're going to feed kibble, and I recommend that you should feed kibble, you need to figure out a way to keep the sheep from eating the kibble, because the sheep will develop a taste for the dog food, and dog food is expensive to be feeding the sheep. So make sure you've got a little cage deal to keep your sheep out of your dog feed.
That went a long ways.
I know, it was good. We started a little early. We went a little late as far as that discussion, though, but I've gotten a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I think we covered almost everything that I've had people ask related to sheep. And now it's out there for the people. So
for the fans,
we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. I'm sure there's a bunch. Let's just scroll to the top and see what we got.